So my initial kind of negative views on harm reduction years and years ago was that it was not recovery.
My conception of harm reduction was that it was actually doing harm.
I thought was not real recovery or legitimate recovery.
To me, I wasn't on board with it.
Harm reduction program is just giving people needles.
That's not helping somebody.
As far as harm reduction, a lot of people still don't see it as a valid pathway to recovery, but I can tell you that it definitely is. And it definitely helped me in the past to find recovery, happiness.
It took a long time for me to understand and realize that harm reduction is part of the arsenal to beat this illness.
So when we talk about reducing harm and we talk about harm reduction and harm reduction tools and practices, there's oftentimes this hyper focus on the substance themselves or the typical what individuals sometimes deem symptoms of your disease, right? Like isolation or being separated from your community or losing maybe housing or being incarcerated. And it's more than that. When we have a myopic view of the problem, we're going to have a myopic solution.
Part of the reason that I had a negative stereotype, a negative view of harm reduction is because my recovery had been abstinence-only 12-step based recovery, and that also meant that the immediate social circles that I built in recovery were comprised of people in abstinence-based 12-step recovery. So when I looked out into the recovery world from my vantage point, all that I saw was abstinence synonymous with recovery and vice versa. And it wasn't until much later in my recovery advocacy and working with people that I came to understand the merits of harm reduction as a practice.
It made recovery possible for me. Instead of abstinence-only recovery, it took the abstinence word out and just left recovery and made that possible for me.
Harm reduction doesn't exclude people like a lot of other programs. A lot of other programs, you have to be abstinent or you can't be in the program. Now, under harm reduction, you can still be using and still be in recovery and still receive help.
Harm reduction opens it up for more people to jump through the hoop and make it through and have a chance at a life.
One of the great benefits of harm reduction is that it allows us to work with people regardless of where they are in the process of change. And one of the best examples of this, I think, is the treatment gap. So the National Survey on Drug Use and Health year over year shows about a 90% treatment gap, which typically is framed as people who want access to treatment but can't get access. But when you do a deeper dive and ask those individuals why they won't receive treatment, the vast majority, something like 96%, say because they either don't want or don't need treatment. And if we rely only on abstinence-only traditional treatment models, it means those 90% are individuals who are going to be community dwelling and not engage with any meaningful kind of care. And what harm reduction allows us to do is to impact and mitigate the harm of their drug use irrespective of where they are in that process of change.
A dominant narrative that society has kind of adopted, if you will, is that to be in recovery, you have to be completely abstinent from all substances, and that harm reduction practices, tools, modalities, if you will, are enabling people.
You always hear people talk about you're just enabling use. It's not enabling use, it's enabling somebody to live, to be more healthy, to not have to suffer alone.
It's enabling them to make healthy choices. It's enabling them to possibly access treatment, and it's enabling them to live.
Harm reduction is enabling, in a sense, it's enabling people to live a self-directed life. It's enabling people sometimes to live, to breathe. It's helping people to improve their health and their wellness and be connected to community.
It enables people to take control, to be more empowered.
Harm reduction is enabling safer use. I certainly interacted with people who shot dope out of bathroom toilet water and river water and things like that because they didn't have access to clean using supplies. And so to me, having access to something like a clean syringe, a sterile syringe, for instance, is not enabling someone to use who otherwise wouldn't be using. It's enabling someone who's using regardless to use more safely.
Giving someone the opportunity to use clean needles and clean equipment and sterile water, those are small steps in harm reduction that could really change someone's life.
Doing things like this helps keep people alive and gives them a chance to meet people who are in recovery, so that maybe someday they could get into the recovery themselves.
In the last few months, while filming this video, my wife, she died from a fentanyl contamination in our drug supply. This was a woman in long-term recovery, someone who worked for the state opioid response effort, a doctor who had all the knowledge, tools, and resources at her disposal. She was a mother. She was a neighbor. She was a mentor. She was a colleague. She was a friend. She was my wife. She was just like you and me.
My partner previously passed away from a heroin overdose. He was alone, and he didn't have Narcan. He didn't have anyone around him that had Narcan. And so I think my life would have been different, because obviously his life would still be here. He'd still be present with us.
My boyfriend had died from overdose. He was the greatest person I ever met. He was smart, he was intelligent, and the funniest person anybody's ever met. Anyone who met him, he made them laugh. And he didn't need to die at 30 years old. My generation, there's so many of us dying. It's people my age that we're losing, and we don't have to. And I want to be a part of helping that.
When I first came to Voices of Hope in 2017 as a participant, I was told about recovery instead of sober or addict. And that started to make me feel a little more comfortable. And as I got more and more into it, they taught me that I'm the expert in my own life. Any pathway that I choose, as long as I'm trying to live healthier and safer, is great. And it's recovery, and it's worthy and valid.
But how they advocate for every avenue of recoveries versus specifically one is a big deal.
At Voices of Hope, we offer a lot of different harm reduction services. We have a mobile outreach unit that goes into Lexington and Louisville and literally meet people on the street. We meet needs such as hygiene, wound care items, snacks, bottled water, coffee, anything we can just to establish a relationship with those individuals and begin a conversation.
I started coming to Voices of Hope because they offered a grief support group, and it was just almost instantly, like, just being there, it just felt different. Like, I could tell that this wasn't like any other place that I had been to, that the people here were going to support me no matter what my choices were.
It was their kindness in offering me services. It wasn't them pushing me into anything. It wasn't them trying to sell me on something. It was literally just, how can I help you in your current state and you walk away happier?
So I went from feeling really, really stigmatized and pushed aside, swept under the rug, to feeling like I'm my own person, I'm a person. I'm a person in recovery. Wow. And just saying that, it sparked something inside of me, and it helped spark a love of helping people.
It helps me to stay in recovery, to help people. It's given me purpose that I wouldn't otherwise have.
None of us really cares how somebody gets up the mountain. We just want to see people get up the mountain.
Here at Voices of Hope and the Louisville Recovery Community Connection and organizations just like ours all across the nation give out Narcan every day. Thousands of doses every year, maybe millions of doses every year in our country go out. And it's awesome. It's great that we are getting that many doses out and distributed into the community, and they save lives. But if we want to find ourselves climbing out of this epidemic, we are going to have to think outside the box.
I wish we would spend less time criticizing various pathways or trying to decide which is superior, and instead finding ways to support each other.
We really need allies in this. We need people that are in recovery, talking to other people in recovery, and explaining what harm reduction is to them.
To me, harm reduction is keeping people alive with safe drug use.
I'm in this chair today because of harm reduction, because of MOUD, and because of open-minded people taking me in and teaching me other ways and other things.
I've been on quite a journey with harm reduction.
It saves lives. It saves lives.
And if anything is going to change, it's going to take a collective effort from each and every one of us.